Our next eyewitness is standing by right now, Peter. Want to go ahead and introduce him?
Yeah. Well, because of his line of work, he may not wish to have his employment specially revealed, and I'm going to let him choose the radio name that he would like to use. You and I know what that name is, Jeff, but I think he'd like to have anonymity.
Whatever he'd like to do. Are you there?
Yes, sir.
Good evening. This is Peter.
Yes, I'm Peter. Next.
And I'm Jeff. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay. Tell us what happened here. What's going on?
Well, on June 1st of this year, I was traveling south on I-55 with my wife and son, and we were in between, St. Louis County and Arnold, which is just it's a suburb just south of St. Louis City proper. And we were looking south and saw from west to east, emerging from up over the horizon, the tree line, 20 to 30 orange orbs.
A fleet.
Yes, it was large. It absolutely caught my attention. I was just completely overwhelmed with it.
Time of day and conditions, please.
It was about exactly 8:59 to 9 p.m. At night. There was absolutely no overcast whatsoever. The moon was about half or three quarters full, if I'm not mistaken. It was a fairly well lit night.
20 to 30 of these orbs, these round items. Color, please. Were they all the same color? Was there any variance in them?
I noticed no variance, but they were orangish red, primarily orange. I'd say more toward orange than red.
Was this group, I'm going to call it a fleet, were they arranged in any particular order, or was it more of a random assembly? And tell us how they were moving.
Originally, they were in somewhat of, if I had to place them in an order, it'd be like two columns. They weren't exactly perfectly aligned, but as they would cross the sky, and it seemed not to be very fast. I don't know what their distance was to us, but there were times when they actually would go into somewhat of a triangular type shape, or it seemed as though they did.
Wow.
And my son, I was trying to maneuver the car off the roadway as safely as possible, and he was able to see that one of them actually looked like it burst into like three others, and they just kind of flew around each other.
It propagated, so to speak.
Yes.
And these items stayed in two columns for a while, and then it sounds like you're suggesting they lost that semi-shape and became just a group as they moved?
They were a group, and they spanned almost the entire. Well, I'll say about 2/3 of my visible, sense of the horizon from side to side. At night, it's hard to tell, distance or height.
Oh, sure.
But it was very difficult, to know that. But I can tell you that my span of vision, they crossed from one side almost to the other.
What was the horizon like under them, and how high were they?
The horizon was would have been mainly woodline mixed with the basic city of Arnold. So you would see a water tower and things like that. But it was, if I had to guess, I would say there were several hundred feet up, maybe as much as 1,000 feet up at the most, if I had to guess.
Okay, I have to ask this, is there any way that a bunch of college punks could have put together a group of Chinese lanterns and released them, in your estimation? Now, you've already argued against that, not argued, but suggested against that, because you're talking about independent movement relative to each other. And that tends to rule out things drifting along on a gentle breeze. Tell us your thoughts on that.
I've never heard of Chinese lanterns until after this incident, and I've looked it up on the internet. It seems as though Chinese lanterns, you can kind of see more of a light toward the bottom.
Correct.
Where the flame would be.
Correct.
And I can honestly tell you, my wife was video recording it, but I was looking through a smaller pair of binoculars. I was trying to kind of get a sense. There was no light emitting from it. It was just a glowing. It just like was this. It was fairly bright, but not so much of a like emitting light as much as it just being a strong glow. And I have to say, the one thing that kind of, as I would start second-guessing myself and kind of thinking, well, maybe this is what it was, when across the sky, it would get to a certain place where they would disappear sequentially, almost as if like actors exiting a stage behind a curtain. They would get to a certain place and they would simply go. It was just a certain area. They might be higher or lower than the other, but once they reached a certain point, they would just disappear.
Peter?
How long did you witness the whole array, and how did they finally disappear from your sight? Did you just drive off? Did they all fade out together? And if so, was it a sequential fading out? How did they go away, essentially?
Well, they actually didn't fade out together. And you have to remember, a vehicle accident, as people were pulling off the road to witness this, some of the drivers were not aware of what was going on overhead. So as certain drivers would start reacting to it, it actually caused an accident right next to us. And so,
really? That's unusual. Yeah.
In my profession, all I can say is I do have a duty to respond to those immediately, of course, and so I was trying to help with that. And as I was doing that, my attention was diverted somewhat between the two. Mm-hmm. But I know that when people would exit their vehicles, they were like, "Oh my gosh, what is that?" And,
wow, that's pretty spectacular.
And so beyond that, I just know that I witnessed a few of them leave. I wish I could tell you I saw all of them leave, but I was so diverted between the two, it was hard.
Well, I understand. You're a serving professional, and you folks are among the great Americans who do that kind of work, so I understand. You want to help, and that's your highest calling, and there is no higher calling than to help your fellow man. So you were able to do both. That's quite a credit to you. And I want to say that as far back as the early 90s, the late 80s, very late 80s, there were fleets sighted of these round objects, both day and night, over primarily Mexico City and, a couple other major Mexican cities. Mexico seems to be the home of the early sightings, and even continuing fairly recently, of what they call flotillas or fleets or very large groups of these. And now we don't hear too many like this. We've got what's that famous black and white film, Peter, of the large group of these things, and they fly behind a water tower or something from the late 40s?
Tremonton, Montana.
Yeah, there you go. Mm-hmm. Okay. So this happens, but not with a great deal of regularity up here. How large would these items have been? And I'll go back to my standard, extend your arm out if you would, put something between your thumb and forefinger. Would these have been as large as a pea? Smaller? I assume they're all the same size.
I think if I were to, I would have to say they would probably be the size of maybe a little bit larger than a pea. They were prominent. They were substantial. All right. They were definitely. I can't say that they were huge to my sight, and I was able to see, but you would have to turn your head to see the whole span of it. What are people around you saying? Anybody talking about this? Well, you had an accident to deal with. I understand. Well, one of the gentlemen was good enough to leave me his number, and he was asking for a copy of the video. He called me the next day, and he had been proposed the Chinese lantern thing too. He said, he's trying to rationalize it in his head too, and we were both just looking as a way to kind of. It really rattled me. I got to tell you, I've been around aircraft since I was a small boy, military and civilian, and it made no sound. It didn't. The characteristics just weren't there of an airplane. I realized it was at night, but I've seen a lot of night flying, and I can't say that even the flight pattern would have been anything that would have, if they were airplanes or helicopters, had been dangerously close to each other, I would think. And I just, beyond that, I don't know. But I took his information. I haven't called him back yet. I've been trying to search for answers myself. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that, as I've researched it in the last several days, I'm beginning to realize that as unusual as this is, and as hard as it is to wrap my head around it, this is not an isolated event, apparently.
Not at all. And if you do a simple search for groups of UFOs over Mexico, you can figure it out. You'll find there's a lot of video online showing these large formations of whatever they are, daylight moving through clouds. And they're kind of whitish usually. Nighttime, orangish, reddish, sometimes white. There's something going on up there. And would you suggest these objects just went on their merry way and continued out of sight, or did they? You mentioned they kind of winked out or went out.
It was I don't know what the physical term would be, but if you were to draw a line from the from the Earth to the sky in some sort of two-dimensional way, and kind of look at it almost as if an actor stage, if you just thought of it as some sort of invisible curtain they move behind, that would have been my best description. And my mind was racing. It still is.
I can hear it. Yeah.
I was kind of thinking, if not, there may be a terrestrial answer for the whole thing, but if not that, I definitely have opened my mind to the possibility of interdimensional. I realized that what I thought I knew, I may not have known so much. That's a gift in a way, because it opens other doors that would otherwise not be opened. So good.